Uhuru to the Black is Back. I just really want to salute this incredible 7th Electoral Campaign School that's kicked off. And I just really want to salute my leadership and the profound leadership that's been given, throughout the coalition and in this dynamic overview that we received on today from Chairman Omali Yeshitela. I'm a member of the African People's Socialist Party. And just again, really want to salute just the profound overview that contextualizes this whole discussion around the use of the electoral process and what does that mean for African people, knowing this history that's been discussed up to now, and including some of the continuous attacks that have been made, against our people in attempting to use something that is supposedly afforded to us as citizens, supposed citizens of this country. So I just really want to again salute the party, the Black is Back Coalition, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and the 7th Electoral Campaign School, and want to salute the strategy of the ballot and the bullet, which doesn't concede any of the democratic space that African people have fought and died for, and that the electoral arena and its history in this country, particularly as it relates to the colonized population, the African community, reveals enough evidence around our assertion, the assertion that the chairman put forward at the beginning of this discussion, which is that freedom is illegal for Black people in this country. And I'll talk about the attacks in just a moment on the African People's Socialist Party, on our leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and the whole entire Black liberation movement of this country for African people who have, since our capture from Africa and have been dispersed throughout this world to be able to build a world for the colonizer, that since that relationship ever began, that African people have been fighting to be free. And even African people's pursuit of the electoral process was a part of a fight for power, and recognizing that power is what contributes to the ability of a people to be free. So this is, but we should never be confused about what African people have been fighting for, is to be a free and self-determining people, something that was robbed from our people through the assault on Africa, through the kidnap and enslavement of our people, the forced dispersal throughout the world that has continued up until today. There is no point since that history where African people have been free, and that the rules have changed, the system has changed its appearance and its face at different points of time, but that can never be confused for genuine freedom for African people. The fact is that our resources, our lives, everything comes under the control of the colonizer. And that's what the attacks on our movement represents, is that this party, this movement, had the audacity to determine that the Black Revolution of the 1960s, which was defeated by the US government, is something that we would not just accept, that we would continue to pursue our freedom, not the freedom defined by this country, by this government, not the democracy defined by this country, which means drones, as Chairman says, in Pakistan, and famine and starvation in Yemen and places all throughout Africa. But it means freedom, how we've determined it, freedom on our own terms, freedom and reclamation of our land, our resources, our labor. That's freedom for African people, and that's the struggle that we've been engaged in, that our movement has been engaged in, and that's why we've come under attack. So just wanted to say those things. And the chairman mentioned, in terms of our pursuit for our ability to use the electoral arena, that they had whole lynch mobs. The chairman tells stories about how he was registering people to vote, and this is where he encountered these lynch mobs. And this is what the fate and reality was for African people, just standing in line to vote, being killed on the streets, having dogs sicked on them, having water hoses, church bombings, all these things that none of these government officials have ever paid a price for. Nobody has ever paid a price for the attacks and the brutality, the murder, the genocide that African people have come under, since the inception of this country, and even for doing things like trying to exercise our right to vote. Nobody has paid a price for those things. And, I also have to salute the fact that this is the 7th Electoral Campaign School. And, this was a place where, I learned what type of candidate, what it was being called on in terms of being a candidate fighting for Black power. What does that mean? What does that look like? It means that this thing called decorum, these things that they, say, this is how you participate in this process. You had to get all of that out of your head in order to really understand what it meant to be a candidate, not a status quo politician. I learned that process through this Black is Back Electoral Campaign School. And what this school does is it defies this history that has, worked to keep the African working class from utilizing this process and forwarding our genuine interests. And up to now, we've had, and it's been, stated up until now, I'm really not contributing too much more to this discussion about the neo-colonialists, the white power and Blackface, these sellouts. That's what we've continuously seen through the electoral process, and who willingly, not something that they do unconsciously, but willingly and enthusiastically carry out the will of white power. But this school has done something different. And first of all, it's taken any excuse away from any African who says they want to, run for office. It's taken any excuse away that you got to play their game or you got to get in to fit in and then you can start making things happen. No, it takes that excuse away and it says, here's how you can have a spine and run for office and represent the genuine interests of the African working class. And so this school has helped to churn out these types of candidates that we need on a platform, a 19-point platform that speaks to, that is an agenda for Black power for African people. And in the beginning of this meeting, Comrade Sister Lisa Davis mentioned that the African People's Socialist Party did run candidates for office. It wasn't the first time the party has run candidates for office. In fact, the chairman ran for mayor in this city in 2001, and he won every majority Black and mixed precinct in the city. He was duly elected as the Black people's mayor of the city of St. Pete in 2001. So the party has, throughout our history, utilized the electoral process to advance, the agenda and the interests of our people. But in 2017 in particular, you had these really high-profile campaigns that put something like reparations on the ballot. And this was part of the continued work by the party to make reparations a household word. And we had organized the World Tribunal in 1982 and 12, tribunals subsequent to this, raising up the demand for reparations. And we took it into the electoral arena, the place where you're not supposed to go to talk about this. And in fact, we were told, you can't win an election and talk about reparations. That's lunatic fringe group over here that can never be taken seriously. Well, it was taken very seriously. And this happened in 2017, which was the first year of this school. And this is a campaign that's cited by the US government in this phony indictment, in their bogus allegations. The FBI, when they came on July 29th and attacked the chairman in the Uhuru movement, including in the building in Aquaba Hall where our people are having this discussion today, the US government cites these elections as some kind of evidence of malign influence, on behalf of the Russian government. And, this whole concept of election interference, it usually occurs whenever there is particularly like the outcome of an election or, the situation that the election causes, conflicts with the interests of the colonial ruling class. And that's what we saw even with the election of Donald Trump. I mean, they've been raising up it was Russians, it was the Russians and election interference to explain how a Trump could happen. That's part of the explanation we've gotten. And again, our campaigns, what they did was they threatened the status quo. They were not your typical campaigns. We were not some regular old politicians just trying to mosey along. We brought the African working class into the fold, into these debates, into the Hilton Hotel in St. Petersburg, Florida, where they had to bring out over 20 cop cars in response to our participation in those debates. And we raised up the demand for reparations to African people. And as it was mentioned, that has made its way, around the world. But what's not considered election interference is when they create felons out of African men and women by a virtue of mass incarceration of our people, and then telling us that we cannot vote. So they turn us, they have this perpetual process of blocking Africans up into prison. Then we're labeled felons and we can't participate in the electoral process, but that's not election interference. No, this whole idea of running a platform of reparations is somehow a Russian interference scheme, as if Black people have not been fighting for this question, demand for reparations for decades. So it's also not election interference when they do things like the chairman mentioned regarding gerrymandering, when they redraw the borders of the districts to redefine the population within that district or county, or, you know, whatever you're running in. But I mean, that's not election interference. That's not considered election interference. It's not considered election interference, this whole farce of a single member district election that actually gets turned into a citywide election in a place like St. Pete, where you have a majority white city. So any true will and any true expression of Black power coming from the African community immediately gets muddied over, because you have to go to a majority white population in the general election and appeal now to white people. Now, a community and a population that does not face the same conditions that you as a colonized African face. But that's not considered election interference. No, in fact, it's quite legal in terms of how they characterize law and legality. It's quite legal to be able to do that. Those things are not considered election interference. So this exposes that there is no real democracy for African people in this country, and including through this so-called democratic process of the elections. And this is not a conspiracy theory. I mean, we've laid out the history, we've laid out the violence, we've laid out how this electoral process is rigged against Black people. It's not a conspiracy. And the July 29th FBI raids on our party, you know, as part of the raids against our party for participating in the electoral process, this becomes extremely clear that, you know, this electoral process is not any real expression of genuine democracy. In fact, they always say the lesser of two evils. And I can't think of a more undemocratic process than that, where you, as a colonized African and as oppressed and exploited people, you get stuck with and are forced to choose between the lesser. You know, and where there's no person that represents no evil on the ballot, but you have to choose which oppressor is going to, I guess, be more direct when they're oppressing you. This is your options. That's not democracy. And the fact is that Africans can't ever experience genuine democracy outside of being a free people. I mean, the whole concept of democracy has been stripped away from African people by virtue of becoming colonized subjects and being forced to produce and reproduce life for somebody else, and a whole social system now being brought into existence from that relationship. Now law and everything comes into existence to be able to reinforce and support that relationship of colonialism and slavery. There's no democracy in that, and that's not an illusion. And so without a power to be self-governing, and with the situation of living under colonial domination, where the colonizer gets to define the world, define democracy, and will let you participate up until the point that your participation presents instability for the colonizer and for their system. And our existence and unwillingness to be slaves, the laborers for somebody else, that already presents a serious threat. And historically, our movements, our organizations, our revolutions that we've built to challenge the influence and to throw off, you know, the influence of the colonizer over our lives, it presents what's been characterized as a national, as a threat to national security, as J. Edgar Hoover said about the Black Panther Party in the 1960s. So, you know, with this, our participation in the elections, saying things like reparations, Black community control of the police, you know, an end to gentrification, exposing these rigged elections, we've been able to, through the electoral process, we've been able to, first of all, massify the demand for Black power, for reparations to African people, an end to gentrification, you know, Black community control of education, and, you know, and solutions for the whole healthcare system and things like that to be created and controlled by our community. We put that forward as a real legitimate solution. So we've been able to massify those demands, win masses of African people to support those demands and to recognize them as their own interests on the one hand. And we've also been able to expose this sham called democracy in this country and the elections in particular. So they're losing this war. That's what the July 29th attacks also reveal, is because they had to go into Southside St. Pete, which is historically the most impoverished community in that city, in the African community, and in Northside St. Louis, in the impoverished African community, to wage an attack that they said is about Russia, but they don't go to Russia, they go to the African community, because this is a fight against Africans and Africans' will to be free. But they're losing that war, or this war. And that's why each year the statistics reveal more and more that the people are disillusioned and that they have no confidence in this government or no confidence in the elections. And so the system, the social system, it cannot rule in the same old way. And this is a direct result of our participation in the electoral process. So we see our effectiveness in this arena, which is part of why we can't concede this space so long as it's available. And we've been in a situation today where we don't have to be afraid to stand up for ourselves and put forward a program that speaks to the real interests of the African community. Again, there is no excuses anymore. Anybody who is an African, who is a colonized subject and gets up on a platform, who has gotten the vote from Black people, who sits up there and represents the interests of white power, that is not being done unconsciously. That is done with intent. That is done with the will to be a puppet of white power. So we're taking all the excuses away from, those types of forces, these types of people that would be used to attack our community, because the situation has changed, the terms have changed, and the world is being redefined. And to not take advantage of that world that's being redefined, it's a conscious decision that they have to make. So again, those Africans that betray our interests, we have to make them go into hiding, through this process of the Black is Back Electoral Campaign School and raising up our own candidates, our own platform. We have to make these sellouts go back into hiding and reconsider whatever the hell it is that they're going to do on behalf of white power. That's how effective this process is being and has to continue being. We have to shame them for working for white power. The ability for this social system to, carry out their will indirectly through using Black people and other colonized people, those days are over. So we know who we're looking at. We're looking at white power. We're looking at the colonial ruling class. When we look at these forces, that is clear. This has been exposed over and over and over again through the work of this coalition, the African People's Socialist Party. So those days are over. And again, the world is undergoing such profound transformation, and that's not something that we're isolated from. We're a part of the transformation. We are a reason that it is transforming, and we have to assume responsibility for that, and including when we go up into the electoral arena with the 19-point platform, with the fight to bring the African working class into this process. We have to know that we're in the process of transforming the world, and that is illegal. That is illegal, because the colonizers have determined that this is how the world is supposed to be. They're supposed to be able to rule. They're supposed to be able to suck the blood of the masses of people around the world. That they're supposed to be able to destroy the planet, and no one is supposed to be able to contest them, or you'll get a bomb, drop in your country. You'll get a drone strike here. You'll be attacked in your own community. This is the statement that they're saying. Freedom is illegal. Genuine democracy as defined by the people is illegal. And, we're saying that we have a responsibility as colonized people to not live like this, to not live in these humiliating, degrading conditions any longer, that our people will have a future despite what it is that the colonizers have determined for us. So that's just, what I wanted to be able to contribute to this, what has been an incredible panel. And again, that amazing overview that was provided by our chairman today. I want to salute all the comrades in the Black is Back, all of those who are watching today, and all of my comrades who are in St. Pete. I wish I could be in that room with you all today, but in light of not trying to spread any more of the ick, I'm going to stay seated right where I am, but I'm tuned in. So Uhuru comrades, want to say we are winning, and hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa. Uhuru comrades, Black is back. Uhuru.